Before getting into the discussion for this video, I believe it is important to define and to understand exactly what it is meant when I say debt slavery. Debt slavery is defined as the pledge of a person's services as a repayment for their debt. In the modern day, all slavery is illegal, at least in the Western world, but debt slavery is still widely practiced in South Asia and parts of Africa. The debt slavery that I will personally be referring to is merely a way of seeing how the majority of the general public is drowning in a sea of overwhelming debt for various reasons and are therefore forced to work to free themselves from debt. Now, this modern form of slavery is nowhere near the horrors of actual slavery, but it is widespread and completely unavoidable, or nearly completely unavoidable, for 99% of society, with the only exception being those that are born into a great deal of wealth. When I say that it is completely unavoidable, I refer to the fact that at some point in everyone's life, they will be in a huge amount of debt. This debt would most often be seen in the purchasing of either a house or some property, or for another big purchase, like buying a car. Due to the insane costs of buying property in most Western countries, people will be stuck paying off the purchase for years. This means that they will have to work, have to have a consistency to their life, and not be able to pursue their own interests as much as they might like. One that has recently bought a house does not have the luxury of being picky about jobs. If they happen to not like the job they currently have, they will simply have to deal with it, unless they got lucky with a different job offer, as they won't have the freedom to quit and spend a month or two looking for a more suitable job. Buying a house will eat up all initial savings one might have, and it will also interrupt plans for future saving, with mortgage payments taking a sizable chunk of every single paycheck. Due to just how large mortgages can be, the average person is not able to become fully mortgage free until their 50s, meaning they are stuck having to work consistently throughout the majority of their lives without being able to take much in the form of breaks. Now, realistically, a bit of debt slavery is going to be inevitable for the majority of society. It's a bitter truth. However, debt slavery stretches far longer than it really should, as it forces most people to work their entire adult life on a precarious treadmill of pursuing pay and getting chased by debt. In an ideal world, we might only be stuck on this treadmill of working off debt up until our 30s, but in the real world, most people can almost never escape debt. Pursuing a further education starts people off with a fairly heavy debt, depending on location, and this education is usually then used to work to pay off such debts. So people will acquire their education, typically in their late teens or 20s, and immediately start working to pay off the debt of such education, while also having to pay for a place to live, typically through renting. By the time they reach their late 20s or early 30s, they might have had their education paid off and can finally start considering buying a house and moving on from renting, which will land them in an even bigger cycle of debt paying. This does not even take into account other big purchases, like cars, which people often take several years to pay off as well. I've been focusing on how a majority of debt slavery is not by choice. However, a lot of people that make a great deal of money can often choose to subject themselves to this cycle. People that choose to indulge in excess and luxury often end up in a cycle of debt, and they are effectively not the same as debt slaves, as they have enough financial freedom to choose to end up in this cycle. However, I do pity them as well, as they participate heavily in the capitalist system of trying to display their wealth through either luxury or large houses, expensive cars, expensive clothes, or an endless list of other luxury items. They have fallen into the foolish desire to demonstrate some sense of superiority over those around them, with great displays of wealth, with such displays leading the majority of them to be stuck on the treadmill alongside everyone else. This tiny minority has the opportunity to be free of debt, to avoid being a slave to debt. However, they lack the self-control to control their desires, and thus are unable to be truly free. Now, of course, the 1% of the 1% typically never has this issue, as they have so much wealth that debt is never truly a concern. But even they can sometimes fall prey to the vicious cycle of debt and end up in situations like bankruptcy. even when they had more wealth than most people will ever see in their lives. Those that get lucky enough to start life in a truly great position by being born into a family of immense wealth are the few that can potentially forever avoid the debt cycle. But they are such a small minority that they can hardly even be factored into the discussion of debt slavery due to being such unique outliers. However, those lucky enough to be born into a relatively well off family will still have to face the cycle of debt slavery, although typically to a much lesser degree. Those who do not need to pay for their education or are given their first car as a gift from their parents will have two great factors of debt removed. Although buying a new car later on down the line would reintroduce that set of debt. These privileged few will still, of course, have to face the issues of debt that are associated with buying a house, or, of course, spend their lives renting, which is an option for others as well, although not the most desirable option. They will, however, be able to lean on their family for support. If they end up in a financially challenging situation, they can use the benefits of coming from a relatively wealthy family to support them through tough points, while most people do not have the luxury of such an option. This support can likely remove a lot of the stress that accompanies being on this treadmill of debt, as if they make a mistake, slip up a misstep, their family can step in and help them for a couple months of debt. Such financial privilege is uncommon, though, as not many families will have the spare funds to support a struggling family member, and some of those who do will simply not have the kindness to lend a hand. A common point that those who happen to be blessed with wealth make is that people should reduce their quality of life in order to manage the stress of paycheck to paycheck living. However, in the modern world, that is just currently not possible. Saving $5 here and there by not treating yourself to a coffee or something sweet is really not enough to free the vast majority of society from the sea of debt that they are sinking in. I myself personally recommend people to find ways of managing their spending and reduce frivolous spending, but really it does little to help in the grand scheme of things. I personally avoid luxury products for the most part, and I don't often indulge in buying new clothes or material goods. I service my car myself whenever possible, and I do my best to keep my spending to a limit, but even still, I have not been able to save a large amount of money simply due to the fact that living is expensive. Even while earning a fair bit above the average for my age and coming from a position of relative privilege, saving enough money to invest in a large purchase, like buying a house, takes a long time. And even once I have, I will be subjected to the cycle of debt slavery for many years in order to pay off a mortgage. All in all, debt slavery is almost entirely unavoidable in pretty much all societies. As mentioned, this is to be expected to some degree, since most people come from nothing and will have to earn all that they get. But work should be done to reduce how long the average person is stuck in the cycle of debt. People who choose to indulge in luxury are not the ones that need this change, since they are making the choice of overspending. But those who are stuck paycheck to paycheck in underpaying jobs with overpriced living expenses deserve a change. Society should not be structured in a way that leads to people being stuck in different forms of debt for the vast majority of their lives, but it is a sad reality of the modern day that most people are. Now, when I originally scripted this video, I personally didn't have a solution to debt slavery. I didn't have a good way of avoiding this painful cycle that most people have to put up with. But I found a interesting video that comes up with a fairly reasonable solution, and it's a fairly simple solution: just build more houses. I will leave it linked. I think it was a much better made video than this is. But it's also an interesting solution or potential solution to the vast majority of problems that we are facing in the current world. Simply more houses need to be built so that people can afford houses, and houses being more affordable means people will have more money to spend on other things. When the vast majority of all your money is going into one thing alone, it makes it a lot harder to live a comfortable life, and people should be able to take breaks from their jobs and use that time to search for other jobs. After, of course, saving up a substantial amount of money to live off for a couple months. But with the way that society is currently structured, there is no chance for anyone to ever take a substantial break from work in order to either indulge in their hobbies or to look for more suitable work. It's a sad reality that we all face, but it's one that I believe can be changed in time.